The envelope arrived just after breakfast, a square of stiff ivory tucked among the day's duller post. I spotted it first. No return address, just my name, Archie Goodwin, penned in a looping, almost feminine hand. I'd seen handwriting like that before. Usually, it came with perfume or trouble, sometimes both. I carried the envelope into the office, where Wolfe was entrenched behind his desk, like a Roman consul awaiting tribute. The morning sun cut a line across the floor, catching the motes in lazy spirals. He didn't glance up. "There's an envelope here for me," I said. "But I suspect it's meant for you." "That conclusion is premature," he replied, still leafing through his latest delivery of books, thick volumes on fungi, judging by the spines. "Unless it contains a check, or poison, I suggest you open it." I did. Inside was a menu card, silver embossed, French and dated last Thursday. A crimson X slashed across the first course, tart aux cerises et safran. Alongside it, folded in half, was a scorched scrap of parchment, stiff as dried skin and scented faintly of smoke and spice. "No note," I said. "Just this." I handed him the card and the burned fragment. He peered at both without rising, then frowned and reached for the magnifying glass he keeps beneath the blotter. "Someone's gone to theatrical lengths," he muttered. "This menu is from Chez Lambert, Delacroix's place." "He's the dead one," I said. "Dropped 2 days ago, right in the middle of his own kitchen." "Yes," Wolfe replied. "From what I read, his death was attributed to a failing heart." Then, "What's this about?" I asked. Wolfe tapped the menu. "A provocation, possibly a lure." The scorched parchment. He turned in his fingers. He held it toward the light. "There's faint ink," he murmured, "and a monogram. D.M. Delacroix. Marchand," he nodded, "or his apprentice." Just then, the office door opened and Fritz entered. Not hurried, not hesitant, just Fritz, bearing a glass tray with our usual mid-morning beverages. He paused when he saw what Wolfe was holding. "That? Where did you find that?" he asked. "The envelope came in the morning mail," I said. "Why?" Fritz set the tray down gently, then took the scrap from Wolfe, holding it like a relic. "I've seen this paper before, in Paris, during the war. Delacroix used to work on this type of parchment, when drafting." "Recipes?" Wolfe said. "No," Fritz replied. "Not recipes. Rituals. He called them les formules finales, his final formulas, private blends, forbidden by law in some provinces. They were never meant to be published." Wolfe arched a brow. "You're certain?" Fritz hesitated. "Yes. This one. I remember the saffron. It was part of a dessert he guarded obsessively. I was told he burned the original notes before fleeing to the States." Wolfe rose. That's rare enough to make the room pause. He crossed to the desk, retrieved the glass of cold milk Fritz had brought, and sipped it. "Mr. Goodwin," he said at last, "call the number for Chez Lambert. Inquire who sent this envelope. If they won't say, then inquire who packed the chef's belongings. And if they don't know?" Wolfe looked at Fritz. "Then we are dealing with someone who possesses a copy of a recipe that should not exist. Which means this is no longer culinary nostalgia. It's subterfuge." I opened the Rolodex and dialed. While the line rang, Wolfe returned to his chair. He didn't lean back. He stared at the red X on the menu. "Someone," he said quietly, "is making a statement." The line clicked. A woman's voice answered, crisp, French accented. "Chez Lambert. Comment puis-je vous aider?" I glanced at Wolfe. He nodded. "This is Archie Goodwin, assistant to Nero Wolfe. We received something we think came from your establishment. May I speak to the manager?" "One moment." Static hummed for 10 seconds. Then another voice came. On mail, velvet slick but weary. Jean-Paul speaking. I introduced myself again. "We got a menu card from your place, marked up and paired with a burnt document. You recognize that sort of thing?" A pause. Then, "We have sent no such item. Was someone cleaning out Delacroix's things recently?" "No, his quarters are sealed, per police order. Why?" I gave the usual answer. "Just making inquiries." He cleared his throat. "If someone sent you anything, it was not authorized." Wolfe held out his hand. I passed the phone. "This is Nero Wolfe," he said. "Was the tart aux cerises et saffron Delacroix's final dish?" Another pause. It was his last invention, Jean-Paul said. But he never served it. It was unfinished. Did anyone sample it? A single bite. He collapsed before the second. Who else knew the recipe? A silence deeper than static followed. Then Jean-Paul said, low and clipped, "Only one other." Wolfe didn't ask who. He thanked the man and ended the call. He turned back to the on menu, then to the fragment in Fritz's hand. "I dislike puzzles designed as performances," he said. This is theatre." "Should I tell them we're not taking cases this week?" I asked. "No," Wolfe said, reaching for the recipe. "Inform the sender we will see them, tomorrow, at 11. I blinked. "That's orchid time." He didn't. "Look up." "Yes, but I don't like being fed poison while someone else chooses the seasoning." She arrived just before 11, announced only by the triple chime of the doorbell. Sharp, punctual, and surgical. I was already halfway down the hall when the second bell rang. I opened the door to find her standing poised beneath the stone lintel, a scarlet scarf tied just so against the collar of a fine wool coat. "Miss Claudine Marchand?" I asked. She inclined her head with the precision of a practiced bow. Her eyes, grey, almost silver, didn't blink once before answering. "Yes, I have an appointment with Mr. Wolfe." "You're expected," I said. "Come in." She stepped across the threshold without a glance behind. No perfume, just a faint aroma of cloves, and something sharper, something like saffron if memory served. Her heels clicked across the tile as I led her down the hall, past the alcove where the globe sat in silent judgment. Inside the office, Wolfe was already in his chair, yellow leather and wide enough for royalty. He didn't rise. I gestured to one of the red chairs before his desk. "Miss Marchand," I said. "Mr. Nero Wolfe." She sat smoothly, knees precisely together, coat unbuttoned with care but not removed. Wolfe regarded her, eyes narrowed but not unkind. The only sound for 5 seconds was the quiet tick of the wall clock. "You were the apprentice to Marcel Delacroix?" Wolfe asked. "Yes, for 6 years. And now you are not." "No," she said, "because he is dead." I watched her face. No tremor, no theatrics. But something in the way she said dead suggested she wasn't finished. "With him, I read," Wolfe said, "that his heart gave out." She met his gaze. "Yes, that is what they printed." "But you dispute that?" "I do." Wolfe leaned back, temple to fingers. He did not prompt her further. She reached into her handbag and withdrew a small card. Not the menu from before. This was Delacroix's calling card. Signed, I saw, on the reverse. She slid it across the desk. "I found this in his coat," she said. "It was addressed to no one, but it included the phrase, 'They'll silence me before that tart is served.'" "Curious phrasing," Wolfe murmured. "You believe he anticipated foul play?" "I know he did. He told me 3 days prior that he feared someone was altering his ingredients without permission. He was working on a new formula. The tart was only a part of it." Wolfe tapped the card once with his index finger. Then why did he proceed? Claudine's hands, resting on her knees, folded. Because he believed it would win him back his name. The recipe wasn't entirely his. He borrowed the framework from another chef, but he had improved it. "Ah," Wolfe said. "So, the motive might be culinary pride?" She shook her head once. "No, legacy." That gave Wolfe pause. His gaze drifted to the scorched parchment still resting on the side tray from the morning. "You recognize the scrap?" he asked, her voice lowered. "Yes." He kept fragments of formulas on parchment, only for dishes he believed were worth dying for. "I see." I shifted in my chair, careful not to break the rhythm of the room. Wolfe continued. "You are French by birth?" "Marseille." "Any family here?" "No, just Delacroix." "Until—" She stopped. Wolfe nodded slowly. "Until he ceased to be." She drew a slow breath. "He trusted very few. He told me that if anything happened to him, I was to find you." "Why me?" "He said you had a palate equal to your principles." Wolfe closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, he regarded her as he might a complex book spine, elegant, but hiding contradictions. "You believe he was murdered?" "I do." "You believe the weapon was culinary?" "I do not know, but I believe it was within. The tart. There was no trace of poison. No trace, she said, is not the same as no toxin. He worked with substances that defied tests, oils distilled in secrecy, herbs known to 2 men in all Manhattan. Name one, Wolfe said. She hesitated. Persian sumac. Legal. Mixed with powdered apricot pit, she added. Wolfe narrowed his eyes. Illegal, he said. And lethal. She nodded. Outside, a horn honked once, distant and low. The room returned to silence. Wolfe turned to me. Archie, you will retrieve the newspaper obituary from Thursday. Then call the Bureau of Chemistry. Ask whether they examined the stomach contents. I nodded, scribbled, then stood. Before I left, I looked at her again. Claudine Marchand, calm as a lit fuse. She met my eye. She didn't blink. But something there, a flicker, told me she wasn't just here for justice. She was here for something else. Something she hadn't said yet. And probably wouldn't, not until it was too late. Chez Lambert was all glass and gold trim on the outside, like a gift box no one dared open. Inside, it was quiet, intentionally so. The air was perfumed with truffle oil and butter, but the lighting made sure nothing felt too indulgent. Just enough shadow to remind you couldn't afford to linger. The maitre d', a thin man with slicked hair and polished vowels, asked my name. Archie Goodwin, I said. On behalf of Mr. Nero Wolfe. That got a twitch from his eyelid. He gestured to a corner table where a tall man in whites stood stiffly beside an empty chair. Sous chef, he whispered. Mr. René Duval. Duval looked like a man who'd scrubbed his hands too often. His fingernails were clean, but the skin beneath had lost its faith in the process. I nodded. Mr. Duval. He offered his hand, shook with exact pressure, then sat. You are investigating Marcel's death. Looking into it, I said. Wolfe doesn't like being lured, least of all with menus. Duval gave a short nod. Yes, that card, I heard of it. You didn't send it? No, I let that hang for a second. He folded his arms. Chef collapsed at 6:37 p.m. on the 25th. He was assembling the tart. He had not tasted it yet. No one else touched the final blend. I stood beside him. What did you do after he fell? I called for help. The maitre d' called the police. We secured the area. Who was first to touch the dish after that? No one. It was discarded with the waste. I watched his mouth as he said it, rehearsed. Not inaccurate, but carefully carved, like a sugar sculpture meant to hold just until dessert. Tell me about the tart. He hesitated. A cherry base, saffron reduction, a whipped almond foam, though that may have been optional. Was the almond foam used? No, he said. Too quickly. I tilted my head. You're sure? Duval smoothed his sleeve. Chef was debating it. He hadn't decided. He usually served that tart? No, Duval replied. It was a new addition, a statement piece. A statement, I repeated. What was it saying? He didn't blink. Rebirth, his term, not mine. The waiter arrived, hovered, and I waved him off. Duval seemed relieved. I leaned forward. You were close with him? He was my employer and mentor, but distant. Distant how? Duval glanced toward the kitchen door, then back. He did not share recipes. He shared impressions. We were to taste his intentions, not duplicate. His work. Ever see him writing anything down? Rarely. He burned notes. Always after midnight. That stopped me. You saw this? Twice. In the wine cellar. Why there? Duval hesitated. That was where he felt safe. I made a note. And the recipe for the tart. You ever see it? No. But he carried something. Folded parchment, always with him. Burned? Duval nodded. Edges. Old paper. I leaned back. Same kind of parchment that showed up in our mailbox. He didn't reply. I tried another door. Did you know Claudine Marchand? He exhaled softly. Yes. You don't like her. He didn't argue. She was gifted, but she questioned him too often. Questioned what? His ownership, his technique. She accused him of theft, said he'd borrowed things from other chefs, older masters. She believed she was preserving the truth. And you? I was preserving his name. That was enough for now. I stood, buttoned my coat. One last thing, I said. The dish, that tart. He ever serve it with a twist? Duval tilted his head. A twist. An extra ingredient. Something off menu. He looked up at me. Very still. Yes, he said. There was always a final flourish. He called it the signal. What was it? Duval's voice dropped. That changed each time. I met his gaze. And what was it that night? He hesitated. He told me, saffron infused in cherry cordial. A drop, no more. You're sure? No, he admitted. But he said, it. Just before. He let the rest trail off. I thanked him and turned toward the exit. At the door, I paused, glanced once over my shoulder. Duval was still seated, hands folded, lips set, still rehearsing the same script. But something in his eyes said he hadn't written it. Chez Lambert's wine cellar didn't start with a door. It began with a question, a velvet rope, a look from the maitre d', a delay of 4.5 seconds while he pretended not to hear me. Claudine had insisted I check the place myself, so after a polite stare down, I was led through the kitchen, past rows of gleaming copper pans, down a narrow stone staircase flanked by cracked tiles. The waiter accompanying me didn't offer his name. His shoes squeaked once every third step. The cellar was quiet, cool, but not cold. Stone walls, wooden racks, bottles organized by region, then year, then vintage. Someone had an obsessive streak, stepped in, and told him I'd manage fine on my own. He hesitated, shrugged, and left without a word. The door creaked shut. I didn't hear a lock, but I also didn't hear him walk away. I took my time. The cellar smelled of cork, mildew, and a faint ghost of plum. The light came from a small brass fixture overhead, humming with a bulb that couldn't make up its mind about the voltage. It pulsed, just slightly. I traced the perimeter slowly. On the left wall, Bordeaux. Opposite, Loire Valley. Shelves too. The far end were deeper, bulkier, burgundy. Near the floor, behind the second to last rack, I noticed something out of rhythm. A small sliver of color, red, the kind of red that doesn't occur in stone or dust. I knelt, reached behind the bottle of 1914 Court and Charlemagne and pulled it free. It was a glove, left hand, leather, lined with satin, red as lacquered cherries. I held it up to the light. Fine stitching, a woman's size, no label. The fingers were curled slightly inward, not stiff from cold, but faintly creased, as if recently worn. There was a faint mark on the thumb, a darker smudge, like oil or sap. I didn't smell cherry. I stood and slipped it into my coat pocket. The light flickered again. Footsteps. I turned, but it was only the waiter, returned with a cough and a stiff upper spine. You find what you were looking for? Didn't know what I was looking for, I said. That's what made it interesting. He looked around the cellar, noted my posture, said nothing. You work the floor or the wine? I assist the sommelier, he said. Then you'd know if something didn't belong here. He shrugged. Depends what it is. I pulled out the glove and held it between 2 fingers. He blinked. No idea, he said. You sure? Not mine. I assumed. Does it belong to someone on staff? I've never seen it before. Right, I said, because red leather gloves are subtle, slip right past the eye. He looked irritated now. I don't handle personal belongings. You handle this room. He didn't reply. I tucked the glove away. Anyone else with access to this cellar? Kitchen staff? Management? Duval on occasion? Claudine? No, she hadn't been down here in weeks. Not since... He didn't finish. I let him trail off. You've got a key. I escort people. The key stays upstairs. Who keeps it? Jean-Paul. That was useful. I stepped out into the hallway. The waiter didn't follow. Upstairs, the main dining floor had filled with hushed voices and deliberate clinks of silver. No music, just soft murmurs behind crystal and white linen. I crossed the floor toward the office. Jean-Paul was behind a desk, his jacket folded over the back of a chair and his tie slightly loosened, just enough to say he worked hard, but not enough to admit fatigue. Back already? He asked. Hard to stay away. He offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Something I can help with? I found a glove in the cellar. Odd place for one. Left hand, red leather. He didn't react. Too quickly. I kept my tone flat. You recognize it? No. Duval's? No. Claudine's? She doesn't wear gloves. She's practical. I watched him closely. You have a record of who accessed the cellar the night Delacroix died? He lifted a brow. No. It's not Fort Knox. It might as well be, I said. Chef thought it was sacred ground. He shifted in his seat. Look, he said. The kitchen staff use that cellar often. Late night. Marcel burned things down there. I heard, I said. Recipes. Jean-Paul nodded. Parchment. He never trusted his mind to keep secrets for long. Did you ever see him carry gloves? No. Did you ever see anyone carry red gloves into a cellar? No, he said, firmer. I didn't. I left it at that. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in his chair. The yellow one, of course. The windows were closed, the orchids tended, and the air held the quiet dignity of a room that understood its own value. I placed the glove on the edge. Of his desk, he didn't reach for it. Describe where, he said. In the cellar, behind Burgundy, tucked, not dropped. Smell? Not strong. Faint resin, might be cherry oil, no label. Small. Woman's. Staged? Too clean to be careless, too hidden to be flaunted. Message? Unclear. Wolfe looked at it again. A red glove, he murmured. A choice. I waited. He rose, crossed to the blackboard, and began marking names and times. Columns. Duval, Claudine, Jean-Paul. Rows. Schedule, motive, access. He paused after writing glove under unknown. He turned. Archie, I want every ingredient in that tart catalogued. Where it came from, when it arrived, and who touched it. Also, he paused. Get a list of guests that night. Dining room and kitchen both. That's a tall order. He sat. So is murder. The doorbell rang at 11:20, which meant Kramer was late by his own standard and early by Wolfe's. I'd been expecting him ever since the glove turned up. I opened the door and there he was, broad, grey, and irritated. Morning, Inspector, I said. Didn't expect you to bring your sunshine. He didn't smile. You got a minute? That depends. Is this official? He pushed past me. Let Wolfe decide that. He removed his hat and coat with the practiced aggression of a man who hated small talk. I led him through the hall and into the office. Wolfe was seated, as ever, in his yellow chair, fingers steepled, not quite looking up from the Gazette. You're early, Wolfe said. You're evasive, Kramer replied. I shut the door. Wolfe gestured toward one of the red chairs. Kramer didn't sit right away. He walked the room like a bloodhound, sniffing for something he couldn't name. Wolfe waited. I read the reports, Kramer said finally. Chef Delacroix, dead at the stove. Heart failure. Yes, Wolfe said. You believe it? Wolfe raised one brow. Do you? Kramer grunted. You called my office, asked about autopsy delays. I was curious. You're never just curious. Wolfe folded the paper. There was an inconsistency. I wished to confirm it. Kramer narrowed his eyes. You think he was poisoned? I think the possibility is too neat to ignore. Kramer sat. There's no motive. There rarely is, Wolfe said, until one appears. Kramer leaned forward. You have something? A fragment, Wolfe replied. A recipe, a glove, and a woman's word. Kramer frowned. Claudine Marchand? Yes. She's been poking. Around the station, whispering sabotage. Not to you, apparently. She skipped me. Came straight here. She believes someone killed him. Kramer gave a snort. Lot of people die in kitchens. Heat, stress, knives. You don't see me chasing ghosts. Every time a baker keels over. This baker, Wolfe said, left a trail of breadcrumbs. Kramer pulled a cigar from his coat, then stopped himself, looked at the drapes, thought better of it. So tell me, Wolfe, what do you think happened? Wolfe leaned back. I think the chef died in the act of creation, but the dish he intended wasn't merely culinary. It was a warning, or a message. Kramer grunted. You think he knew he was going to die? Perhaps. And you think someone helped him along? Wolfe nodded. Possibly without realizing it. That's not a theory. That's a shrug. It's a possibility with traction, Kramer looked at me. I shrugged. We found a red glove, tucked behind wine bottles, women's size, not Claudine's. Kramer grimaced. I hate symbolism. Then you'll hate this case, I said. Kramer leaned back in the chair. So what do you want? Wolfe glanced toward the blackboard. A dozen lines, names, arrows. I want your cooperation. Quietly. You have access to records I do not. Lab analysis, delivery logs. I want a list of ingredients received by Chez Lambert in the past week. I want toxicology. I want detail. Kramer tapped his fingers once on the armrest. You think I'll just hand that over? I think you're here because part of you already believes this wasn't natural. Kramer sighed. I've got pressure on my neck from downtown. No one wants another scandal involving the French elite and a dead body in a gourmet kitchen. Then don't let it be a scandal, Wolfe said. Let it be justice. Kramer rose. You always talk like that when you want something. Wolfe smiled. It's the only time you listen. Kramer grabbed his coat, paused at the door. I'll give you the delivery records. But if I find you feeding me theatrics, you'll storm out and return tomorrow, Wolfe finished. Kramer didn't deny it. He turned, nodded once to me, then left. The door shut. Wolfe exhaled, not loudly, but deliberately. Archie, he said, start with the spice invoices. I want every box that arrived between Tuesday and Thursday. Even the ones unopened? Especially those. And the glove. He glanced at it, resting on the edge of his desk. That was a signal, he said. Now I want to know what it was pointing at. Fritz brought in the tea tray just as Claudine arrived. The timing, naturally, was not accidental. She entered the office with a parcel wrapped in butcher's paper, bound with string. Her gloves were off this time, fingers pale and precise. She placed the package on Wolfe's desk as if offering a relic. Wolfe eyed it, but didn't move. He was in the yellow chair, his left eyebrow slightly elevated. You brought something? He asked. Claudine nodded. His recipe journal, the personal one, not the kitchen ledger. Wolfe reached out, slowly, and pulled the parcel toward him. Where was it? In a false drawer, beneath the spice rack in his study. You had access. She hesitated. He once showed me how it opened, years ago. Wolfe slit the string cleanly with his penknife. He peeled the paper back to reveal a brown leather-bound book, embossed only with the letter D. He opened it. Inside, the writing was tight, neat, in blue-black ink. Recipes, crossed notes, ratios. Wolfe flipped forward. Toward the center, several pages had been removed. Not torn, not ripped. Excised, with care. A sharp blade, clean edge. 3 pages missing. Were they gone when you found it? Yes. Who else knew about this book? No one. No one else saw him use it? Not that I know of. Archie stepped closer. May I? Wolfe handed him the book. I examined the stubs. Clean, yes. But there were faint marks on the next intact page. Ink shadows. Mirror impressions from the facing side that was no longer there. I tilted the book toward the lamp. You see it? I asked. Wolfe leaned forward. He murmured. Left margin. Ink bleed. Looks like a list, I said. Ingredients. Fritz had remained silent. Now he stepped closer. He peered down, then drew in a breath. Not loud, but enough. You know it? Wolfe asked. Fritz nodded. I remember that dish. He only made it once, in Lyon, before the war. What was it? Fritz hesitated. Tourte de feu. Fire tart? Yes, Fritz said softly. Saffron, cherry, ground apricot kernel, a trace of stone fruit oil. It was volatile. He stopped making it after someone fell ill. Wolfe sat back. Why? It had a bitter base. Natural cyanide. Meant only in microdoses. Who fell ill? A local critic. He recovered. But Marcel was frightened. He destroyed the formula. Or pretended to, I said. Claudine sat, hands clasped. I told him not to bring it back. He said he had perfected it. And these pages, Wolfe asked. He told me nothing. But I believe they were the final adjustments. Wolfe tapped the cover. This journal. Who benefits from its absence? Claudine's voice was quiet. Anyone who wants the dish, erased, or falsely claimed. Wolfe stared at the missing pages. Erased, he repeated. Fritz spoke. It was not a dish. It was an event. Wolfe glanced at him. You believe the missing ingredient was the danger? Fritz nodded. Yes. If it was prepared as he first devised it, it could kill. And someone removed the only trace, Wolfe said. Not quite, I added. The pressure marks left enough to reconstruct. Wolfe gave a small nod. I shall require the following: high-grade parchment, a graphite stick, and isolation. He stood, handed me the journal. Archie, take rubbings of these 3 stubs. Light pressure, use care. I nodded. Wolfe turned to Claudine. You were right to bring this. I wasn't certain you'd believe me. He gestured toward the stove in the corner of the office. I believe heat and motive. She stood. Do you think it was the tart? I think it was not meant to be eaten, Wolfe said. I think it was a signal. To whom? To someone who knew what was missing and what that meant. Fritz picked up the tray, turned toward the door. He paused. Mr. Wolfe? Yes? If he used the old formula, then he was not the first intended to eat it. Wolfe didn't reply. He sat down and stared at the journal, like a man reading someone else's confession, written in saffron and ink. The boarding house on West 38th had seen better days, though I doubt they were much better. The stoop sagged slightly. At the edge, a cigarette burned out on the 3rd step. Inside, the wallpaper wore nicotine like an old suit, and the air smelled of damp wool and cooked onions. I'd been given a name, Samuel Laird, former kitchen porter at Chez Lambert, currently the janitor, occasional handyman, and presumed silent, witness to a bad night's secret. The landlady pointed down the hall without asking questions. Either she had poor hearing or excellent instincts. I found him on the 2nd floor, sanding a stair spindle with a rag and a bottle that didn't. Smell like polish, Mr. Laird? I said. He turned slowly, thin, tired, eyes like boiled glass. But it was the hands I noticed, wrapped in gauze. The skin beneath looked red, raw, peeled. You looking for rent? He asked. No, I'm looking for something that didn't belong. In a fireplace. He paused. Stood. Didn't reach for the bottle. Who sent you? Nero Wolfe. That stopped him. Completely. You the assistant? I nodded. Thought you'd be older. I age slow. Helps with the job. He sat on the stair and rubbed one wrist. You want the story or the clean version? Give me the one you were paid to forget. He gave a dry chuckle. I worked. Under Delacroix for 2 years. Dishes, trash, the occasional errand. The night he died, I was off shift. But I was near, waiting for the kitchen to clear so I could scrounge something decent. Who called you in? I don't know the name. Just a voice. Said something needed burning, fast. You recognize the voice? No. It was muffled. Male. Young. Accent. Sounded local. Manhattan. Maybe Bronx. What were you told to burn? He shifted on the step. Didn't ask. Just found the box beside the back hearth. Wooden. Tied shut. Smelled like paper and old spices. Maybe fruit. You opened it? I didn't need to. It was already singed. Some of it loose. I shoved it all in. Took a poker. Stirred till it curled. And the burns? Greedy hands. He muttered. It flared. Caught me bad. But it was gone in minutes. Did anyone see you? He shook. His head. You're sure? Back hearth's in the service lane. No eyes there. I reached into my pocket and took out the sketch Wolfe had made. A rough rendering from the rubbing of the missing recipe page. He glanced at it. That's the kind of thing I burned. You remember a name? Ingredient? He paused, then pointed to one line. Sumac oil. That was written big, underlined. You sure? I saw it just before the page curled. I folded the paper. You tell anyone else? No. You were paid? He nodded. $50, cash, rolled tight. You kept it? No. Why? He held up his palms. I had to buy bandages. I stood. You afraid? He looked up at me, blinked once, then twice. No, I'm already cooked. I slipped him Wolfe's card. If someone contacts you again, use that. He took it, folded it slow. I like the chef, he said. He was hard, but fair. Someone wanted him buried with more than a casket. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was finishing lunch, cold tongue, mustard, sliced apple. He waved me in without looking up. Report, he said. I sat. Samuel Laird. Confirmed. He burned a box in the rear hearth. Contents? Spice parchment, possibly fruit-soaked. Matches your reconstruction. Initiated by whom? Unknown. Male voice. Manhattan dialect. No name, no trace. Payment. $50. No follow-up. Burns? Second degree. Both hands. Wolfe wiped his fingers and leaned back. The parchment was not only damning, it was urgent. I nodded. He saw sumac oil underlined. Wolfe closed his eyes. Then we are close, he murmured. Very close. I paused. There's something else. He opened his eyes. Laird said Delacroix wasn't the intended meal. Wolfe studied me. No, he said softly, he wasn't. The tart arrived at 6:16 precisely, borne on Fritz's silver tray with the reverence of a ritual offering. It gleamed softly in the lamplight, its cherry glaze catching the gold in slow flickers. No garnish, no adornment, just a perfect circular crown. Wolfe glanced up from his book, not to greet the dish, but to gauge the scent. He took a long breath through his nose and nodded once. Sit, he said. Fritz obeyed, taking the chair beside the serving cart. Claudine had already arrived. She stood near the fireplace, arms folded tight, gaze steady on the tart. She had removed her gloves at the door. I took my usual post near the globe, pen ready. Wolfe reached for the fork without flourish. He sliced the tart slowly, evenly, with the practiced precision of a botanist dissecting a rare bloom. He lifted the first, bite to his lips, closed his eyes, chewed, swallowed, then silence. No remark, no second bite. Mr. Wolfe? I asked. He raised a hand. He reached for the water glass, took a sip, and wiped his mouth. The saffron is faint, he said, but the cherry is bold. Fritz? Yes, sir? You replaced the almond foam. Yes. With what? Aerated. Vanilla. Natural extract. Not synthetic? Certainly not. Wolfe nodded. Acceptable. He turned to Claudine. The original recipe included bitter almond essence? Her voice didn't waver. Yes. How much? A quarter teaspoon. Infused into the foam. Ground pit or liquid? Liquid. A distillation. Wolfe turned to Fritz. Your opinion? Fritz looked troubled. It would mask well in cherry. Very well. Wolfe gestured. And the result? Fritz exhaled. Trace cyanide. If ingested quickly, almost undetectable unless concentrated. Wolfe turned back to Claudine. You knew? I warned him. When? The morning before he died. Did he listen? She hesitated. He smiled. Wolfe raised his brow. That is not an answer. No, she said. He did not. Listen. Fritz stood, restless. He was arrogant, always believed he could balance the ratio. Wolfe's gaze settled on the tart again. He intended it as a test, not of flavor, of truth. I stepped forward. I mean, Wolfe said. He suspected someone might tamper with it, so he added the danger himself. Not to kill, but to provoke. Claudine shook her head. Then why serve it? He didn't, I said. He collapsed before he could. Wolfe nodded. Which means someone may have interfered. Someone who knew the essence was included, or feared it. He pushed the tart aside. Claudine, who had access to the recipe? No one. Not directly. Not even Duval? No. But he saw you work. Yes. He would have seen the foam prepared. Yes. Wolfe tapped the table once. You told him. Her voice caught. I warned Marcel. I didn't tell anyone else. But someone knew, Wolfe said, and feared the result. Fritz spoke quietly. If they believed the chef would taste it, first, as always, they could wait. Let the dish do the damage. Wolfe's voice dropped to a murmur, or switch the ingredient before it left. The kitchen, Claudine looked up sharply. No one could have. No one, Wolfe asked. No. Then it was already switched. She frowned. Wolfe nodded toward the tart. This, Fritz's version, is safe, but the original was not. He stood. This confirms it. I stepped forward. Confirms what? He turned. The final recipe was never meant for the table. It was bait. Claudine moved to the edge of the desk. Then who took it? Wolfe looked at her. Who had reason to destroy the journal? Who feared the recipe more than they feared suspicion? Her lips parted. Wolfe nodded. Someone who touched the tart. Someone who saw the phone prepared. He stepped to the blackboard. He circled a name. Duval. The blackboard came out when Wolfe needed to see what his brain refused to say aloud. He'd had it wheeled into the dining room after breakfast, chalk in hand, and a look that meant the world was not to intrude. Fritz took the cue and withdrew without a word. I stayed, pad ready, watching from the end of the table. The board already bore a web of names, Delacroix at the top, underlined twice. Below him, Claudine, Duval, Jean-Paul. Off to the side, a small red circle labelled glove. Another, journal. Arrows connected them like streets on a map with no destination yet. He stood there in silence. No cigar, no complaint. Just chalk on slate, shaping order from chaos. Archie, he said at last, give me the names of the confirmed tasters at Delacroix's private dinners. I flipped my notes. Jean-Claude Bisset, food critic for Le Goût, died 8 months ago, claimed food poisoning. Wolfe made a mark. Bisset, gout, 8 mem, dead. Next. Harold Niven, editor, The Palette Ledger, found in his hotel room, undetermined. That was 5 months back. He drew another arrow. Niven, PL, dead. I leaned in. You think Delacroix's tart made the rounds early? Wolfe stepped back. No. I think he rehearsed it. Served variations. Each one closer to the final design. Like poison with a slow bloom. Or a message. With poor timing, he returned to the board. Who else attended these private dinners? I read. Eloise Van Dorn. Survived. No known symptoms. Still publishes. Exclude her for now. He boxed her name. Van Dorn, alive. And Kramer confirmed. Yes, I said. We got the guest lists. Bisset and Niven were both there. One at each dinner. Different months. Different menus. Wolfe drew a horizontal line across the board. Here, he said. Timeline. He marked off 9 spaces, each labelled by month. Beneath June and January, he drew crosses. Bisset. Niven. He was testing, Wolfe said. But not for flavour, for nerve. Meaning. Each dinner was an experiment. He escalated, each course more daring, more illicit. I watched him circle sumac oil 3 times. He added it after. Niven? Yes, I said. He tapped the chalk once. Because Niven didn't react. He wasn't the target. But Bisset reacted, then died. I stood. That wasn't coincidence. No, Wolfe said. It was silence. He turned. Delacroix was threatened by someone who knew what he had served. Who feared the recipe would speak? Who? Wolfe drew a thick arrow from Duval to glove. Someone in the kitchen. Someone who knew what was served. And what it meant. The tart wasn't meant to dazzle. It was a cipher. And it had been answered. With fire. With silence. And now, with fear. The bishop was not a real bishop. Though the way he dressed, you'd be forgiven for thinking the Vatican had gone theatrical. He wore a deep purple scarf, a silk carnation in his lapel, and shoes that hadn't touched rain in years. His real name was Elwyn Brindle, but no one had used it since the Hoover administration. I found him in the back of Pasticcios on West 53rd, sitting alone with a half-empty bottle of grappa and a glass he kept toasting without drinking. I approached slowly. Elwyn, I said. He squinted, blinked. The eyes focused but didn't quite settle. Ah, the secretary, he said, waving his hand with regal limpness. Wolfe's handsome little paper pusher. I took a seat without asking. I hear you knew Marcel Delacroix, he laughed. It came out in a high warble, like the last honk of a dying goose. Knew him. I dined with him. I scorned him. I tasted his sins and wrote them in gold ink. He's dead. He tapped the glass, nodded. Yes, dead. They all die. You had words with him, loud ones, last month, he nodded. He claimed the tourteau cerise et saffron was his, wasn't it? Elwyn leaned forward, eyes moist and glinting. No, it was mine. Mine and Jules Bernard's. In Marseille, before Delacroix fled with the kitchen knives. You have proof? I had a letter, signed, but it vanished. Like cherries in a flame, I kept my voice calm. You were at the private dinner 2 months ago? He tilted his head. Yes, Marcel invited me. Said he had a new masterpiece. You tasted the tart? He shook his head. I arrived late. He was red, sweating, furious. Said someone had tampered with the base. Did you see what he used? No. He sent it back to the kitchen, started over. You stayed? I drank. I raved. I told him if he served my dish, I'd bury him in butter. He giggled again. I watched him. Elwyn, did you speak to Duval? The sous chef? Ugh. No palate. All posture. Claudine. She has Delacroix's hands and his temper. But no, we didn't speak. Did you see anyone near the back? Prep line. He blinked, then smiled. Ah, yes, the red glove. I didn't move. Say that again. He reached for the glass, missed it, tried again. She wore one. Only one. Red leather. Very chic. I remember because I thought, who pairs saffron with scarlet? Elwyn, when did you see the glove? Early. Before dinner. Did anyone else? He leaned back. No idea. But it was distinctive. I kept my face still. Elwyn, that glove was never made public. He smiled. Then you owe me a drink. I stood. Elwyn, you're going to need to sober up. He chuckled. I was born intoxicated. I leaned in. If you remember anything else, you contact me. Wolfe will want names, not colour commentary. He raised his glass again. To Wolfe. May his tongue rot before his taste. I left him to the bottle. Outside I lit a cigarette and watched the rain start up again. A fine mist curling off the awning. I dialed the brownstone, Wolfe answered, which meant I had him mid-thought. He mentioned the glove, I said. Before I did. Ah, Wolfe murmured. So? He was quiet a moment. It wasn't his glove, he said. No? No, Wolfe said. But he saw who wore it. And that means? It means we've caught the wind. Now we need the fire. Wolfe summoned us to the dining room. Myself, Fritz, Claudine, and, in an unusual concession, Kramer. He had arrived. Uninvited, but Wolfe let him stay. That alone told me something was coming. The blackboard was freshly rearranged. Gone were the old lines and arrows. In their place stood 3 names, 3 dates, and 1 phrase written dead center in block chalk. Il Solitario. Florence, 1923. Wolfe sat beneath it, hands folded on his lap. Not behind his desk, not in his chair, but beneath that word, as if putting himself in service to it. I have something to disclose, he said, and I would prefer no interruptions. Kramer grunted. No guarantees. Wolfe ignored him. He nodded to me. I stepped forward, holding the document Wolfe had translated that morning, a page of handwritten Italian, signed and sealed. This, I said, is a notarized excerpt from the original recipe journal of Jules Bernard, recovered from his sister's estate in Milan. Bernard's dead, Kramer muttered. Yes, Wolfe said. Long thought dead. He vanished in 1925, presumed drowned, but his journal lived on. Claudine took a breath, and Marcel knew it. Wolfe met her gaze. He did more than know it. He stole it. He pointed to the journal on the table. Delacroix's, the one Claudine had brought, the one with missing pages. Those missing pages, Wolfe said, were never torn out. Kramer frowned. What? Do you mean? They were never there. They were never written by Delacroix. They were planted. Forgeries. Kramer crossed his arms. Prove it. Wolfe turned to Fritz. Fritz, please describe the ink used on Delacroix's standard entries. Blue-black, Fritz said. French manufacture, slight oil sheen, consistent flow. And the replacement pages? Thinner stock, different bleed. And, he hesitated, the smell is different. Wolfe nodded. Archie confirmed it under ultraviolet. The ink on the missing pages glows differently, because it was manufactured in America, post-war. Not in France, I stepped in. The forgeries were added after Delacroix's death, planted in a decoy box, the one Laird burned, Claudine whispered, to shift the trail. Wolfe's voice dropped. Yes, someone wanted the world to believe that Delacroix had made something deadly, but also his own. Kramer frowned. So who's the thief? Wolfe didn't answer immediately. He turned to the board. He picked up a piece of chalk and wrote one name beneath Il Solitario. Delacroix. Then he drew a line through it. Delacroix. Copied Bernard's recipe. Modified it. Claimed it. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that Bernard's original journal still existed. In Italy. Preserved by family. Quiet. Untouched. Fritz cleared his throat. There is more. Wolfe gestured. Proceed. Fritz retrieved a slip of folded paper from his coat. He unfolded it carefully, laying it flat on the table. This, he said, is a letter Delacroix wrote to me. Unsent. Dated 3 weeks before his death. Wolfe motioned to me. I read it aloud. Fritz, there are debts even a chef cannot disguise beneath crust. I took something I believed dead, but recipes are like ghosts. They haunt in silence. I thought I had buried Bernard. I was wrong. Kramer rubbed his chin. He knew he was in trouble. He feared exposure, Wolfe said. Not for poison, for theft. Claudine's voice was faint. Then the motive wasn't pride. No, I said. It was revenge. Wolfe stood and faced the board again. Someone, close to Bernard. Someone who knew the recipe, who watched Delacroix profit, ascend, and pretend. Kramer snorted. Then why wait 20 years? Wolfe turned, slow and precise. Because it took 20 years to make the dish dangerous. He paused. To perfect the revenge. I stepped forward again. And the forgeries? They weren't planted by Delacroix. They were left as a trap. To bury him and mislead anyone following the trail. Kramer narrowed his eyes. Then who made? Them? Wolfe tapped the chalk once. There is only one person with access to Bernard's original papers. One who knew the language, the stock, the ink, and had motive. He turned slowly. Jean-Paul. Claudine gasped. Impossible. He was loyal. No, Wolfe said. He was methodical. Careful. Silent. Kramer stood. I want him in custody. I already made the call, I said. He's being brought in. Wolfe sat again. We will now wait. The wait lasted 9 minutes. Fritz returned with tea. No one drank it. At the 10th minute, the doorbell rang. Fritz did not answer it. I did. A uniformed officer stepped in with Jean-Paul in tow. His coat was pressed. His hair, perfect. But his eyes were dull. Wolfe nodded toward the red. Chair, please. Jean-Paul sat. I assume you know why you're here, Wolfe said. Jean-Paul said nothing. You forged the journal. Burned the decoy. You bribed Laird to destroy it. Still nothing. You thought we would follow the cyanide trail. We did. But you forgot. Wolfe leaned forward. Ingredients don't lie. But signatures do. At last, Jean-Paul spoke. He killed Jules. No one moved. He pushed him into the river. In Lyon. No body. No report. No record. And you saw? No. But I knew. Jules sent me letters. Marcel stole everything, even the dish. Jules called it Tourte du silence. Not aux cerises. Wolfe nodded slowly. You loved Bernard. Jean-Paul looked up. He was my brother. I drew a sharp breath. Claudine's face changed. Then why kill Delacroix now? Jean-Paul smiled. Soft. Sad. Because I waited for him to make it again. To stand in Bernard's shoes. And fall. He reached into his coat. 2 officers stepped forward. He withdrew only a handkerchief. No weapon, he said. No regret. Kramer stepped beside him. You're under arrest. Jean-Paul stood. He thought food made him immortal, he said. Then gently. But it only made him remembered. They led him out. Wolfe leaned back. He closed his eyes. Archie, he said, bring me a peach. Why? I need something simple and honest. The cellar hadn't changed. Same waxy glow from the single bulb. Same stacked bottles. Same faint scent of cork and ash. But something was off now. Not in the room, but in the memory of it. The last time I'd been here, I'd followed the waiter's lead. I'd glanced, noted, poked around. This time I moved like Wolfe. Slow, silent, surgical. I closed the door behind me. No sound, no movement upstairs. Just the hush of stone and wood. I traced the wall again, left to right. Burgundy shelf. Bordeaux, Roe, Loire rack. Near the burgundy shelf, I crouched. I'd pulled the red glove from here before. A planted clue. Sloppy, yes, but not without cunning. A warning disguised as a mistake. I tapped my knuckles against the lower panel. Solid. Moved. One bottle. Nothing. Another. A third. I heard it. Faint and hollow. Just behind a dusty bottle of 1926 Von Romanet. I gripped the rack with both hands and leaned gently forward. It gave. Not far, but enough. A click. A seam opened, almost invisible before. Behind it, a box. Small, flat, wood-stained dark, ornate latch, no lock. I eased it out. Inside were two things. First, folded pages, aged parchment, creased, faintly aromatic with spice. Second, a spice box, walnut, French inlay. I opened it. Inside, 6 compartments. 5 were labelled. 1 was not. The unlabelled compartment held a fine tan powder. Just beneath it, the faint remnants of shattered pit shells. Almonds. Bitter. I sniffed once, then stopped. This wasn't kitchen stock. This was chemistry. I folded the parchment and tucked it inside my jacket. I left the box where it was. Then I heard something behind me. Not footsteps. Breath. I turned. Duval, leaning in the cellar doorway, jacket unbuttoned, arms crossed, and the slightest twitch in his left eye. I was told you'd returned. I nodded. I had a few things to finish. His eyes lowered. The glove again? No, I said. This time it was almonds. He tilted his head. You found something. You sound sure. I know Delacroix. He didn't leave loose ends. No, I said. But someone else did. He took a step forward. Not threatening, measured. Who? Someone who wanted us to think Claudine was careless, that she'd left the tart poisoned, that she'd lied. Duval's expression flickered. And you think that someone was me? I raised an eyebrow. I think someone knew exactly where the false panel was. He smiled faintly. Everyone knew. That's where we hid the good bottles. Not this. Time. I took another step forward. There was a box. Inside were Bernard's original notes. The real ones. Not the forged set Jean-Paul planted. Duval's face changed. Not fear. Contempt. So? They were stashed beside crushed almond. Pits. He gave a short laugh. You think I killed him over crushed pits? No, I said. I think you tried to frame Claudine over them. His jaw flexed. She was sloppy. She always was. She thought she knew better. And you wanted her. Blamed. She was to blame. She brought the formula back. I stepped closer. She brought the formula. You added the bitterness. He didn't move. I continued. You switched the almond extract. Replaced it with bitter distillate. You knew. Marcel tasted everything first. That's why you didn't need to touch the dish itself. Just the base. He shook his head slowly. You can't prove that. I smiled. You're right, I can't. I held up the folded parchment. But he can. He stared. What is that? The final pages. Not Jean-Paul's. The ones Marcel kept. He didn't trust anyone. Not even her. Duval's eyes flicked to the side. He was arrogant. Yes, I said. But not stupid. He made copies. He hid them. And he left his final note on the back. I opened it slightly, written in tight, slanted French. If this dish kills me, search the burgundy wall. Duval turned to run. I caught his arm mid-spin and drove my shoulder forward. He staggered. I stepped back and raised my voice. Up here. Footsteps thundered above. Jean-Paul's voice shouted, What happened? No one moved. A moment later, the door burst open. Kramer stepped in with 2 uniforms. I let them take Duval. He didn't speak again. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe waited. He didn't stand. He didn't ask. I placed the parchment on the table. He opened it, read twice, then turned to Fritz. Boil water. Sanitize glass. I want the cherry reduction prepared again, without foam. Fritz bowed slightly. Yes, sir. Wolfe looked up. At me. You've been thorough. I sat, thank the wall. Wolfe closed the parchment. He always trusted flavour, but in the end, he left the truth to ink. I nodded. And almonds. Wolfe sighed. A tragic nut. Then he reached for the peach I'd brought earlier. Let us return to sweetness. Wolfe hadn't moved from his chair in 3 hours. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was that the orchid timer had rung, the lunch bell had passed, and the tray Fritz left beside him remained untouched. He was thinking, not brooding, building, the way tectonic plates build pressure before a quake. I sat on the edge of the red chair, flipping through my shorthand notes from the cellar discovery. Wolfe's eyes never left the blackboard. At 1:47, he finally spoke. "Archie," he said, "when did the sample arrive?" "The tart?" "Yes. Morning of the 25th. Couriered. Delivered with a note." "Describe it again." "It was sealed in a plain pastry box. No branding. No card. The courier said it came from Chez Lambert, from Delacroix himself." Wolfe tapped a finger on the arm of his chair. "Who received it?" "Fritz. He opened it in the kitchen. You were upstairs." "And he tasted it?" "He didn't. He saved it for your approval. You declined." "Why?" "Because it arrived without context. You said, and I quote, 'I do not dine under riddles.'" He nodded once. "And then?" "Fritz set it aside. Planned to discard it after lunch. But before that happened, we got the call. Delacroix had collapsed." "Collapsed," Wolfe murmured, after testing his final tart. He closed his eyes. "Archie, retrieve the courier slip." I went to the side desk, pulled the folder. Yellow carbon copy. Standard fare. Wolfe reached for it, then read it silently. "Delivered. By Kinney Dispatch," he said. "Signature illegible. No sender's return address." He looked up. "It wasn't meant for me." I frowned. "You think it wasn't from Delacroix?" "No. It was from Delacroix, but not for me." He tapped the slip. "Look at the tag. The envelope was addressed to the master chef of the brownstone, which you assumed was meant for you." "No," Wolfe said, "which I chose not to correct. But it wasn't addressed to me. It was meant for Fritz." The thought struck me hard enough to sit back. Wolfe continued. "Delacroix knew Fritz, admired him. He'd sent him samples before. Quiet offerings, from one craftsman to another." I nodded. "He did. Back in 42, the truffle mousse. This was another. Only this time, he trailed off. Fritz stepped in with fresh tea. Wolfe didn't look up. 'Fritz,' he said, 'that tart Delacroix sent. Did he send it to you?' Fritz paused. There was no name. But was it familiar? The answer took a long time. Yes? You recognized his work. Fritz set down the tray. The pastry was his style. The glaze was his signature. Then why didn't you taste it? Fritz met Wolfe's eyes. I had an instinct. Wolfe inclined his head. Describe it. The texture was wrong. The scent, too forward. It had been tampered with. Wolfe nodded once. So you believed it might have been altered after Delacroix prepared it? Fritz's jaw tightened. Yes. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, bring me the ingredients list again. The final formulation. I retrieved it from the drawer. He read it silently, then turned to Fritz. If you had eaten it, would you have survived? No, Fritz said softly. Wolfe exhaled. It was meant for you. Fritz didn't respond. Wolfe leaned forward. Delacroix sent you a gift, but someone intercepted it, altered it, reboxed it. They knew he sent you samples. They used that trust. I said, but he tested the tart, not Fritz. Wolfe closed. His eyes. He tested it because he suspected something was wrong, as Fritz did, and it killed him. I paced to the window. So the killer didn't mean to murder Delacroix. No, Wolfe said. He meant to silence Fritz. Fritz was motionless. But why? I asked. Wolfe turned back to the blackboard. Because Fritz would have known about the forgery, about the flavors, about the history. He would have tasted the deceit. Fritz spoke finally. I thought it was peculiar, that it arrived with no message. You tasted the betrayal before it touched your lips. Wolfe said. He stood. The question is, who knew Delacroix would send something to Fritz? I answered. Only those in the kitchen. Duval, Jean-Paul, possibly Claudine. Wolfe shook his head. Not Claudine. She would have warned us. And Jean-Paul needed Fritz alive to confirm the forgery. So Duval. Yes, Wolfe said. Duval knew, and Duval had motive. He feared exposure, feared that Fritz would taste the truth. I paused. Then Delacroix died protecting Fritz. No, Wolfe said. He died protecting craft. We were silent. Then Wolfe stepped to the dining table, poured himself tea. Bring Kramer, he said, and prepare the board. The final move is ours. The dining room was dim, but not dark. Shadows hung like silk from the corners, caught between lamplight and velvet drapes. Outside, the last snow of March whispered against the panes. Inside, silence sat first. Nero Wolfe, in his yellow armchair, drew breath as if storing it. His eyes, always slow to move, scanned the half-circle of red guest chairs arranged like petals before him. Each one was filled. Claudine's gloved fingers rested on her lap, knuckles white. Beside her, the sommelier Langford pressed a handkerchief to his temple, where nerves leaked through pores. The Bishop of Broadway sat farthest right, still in furs, but sobered. Between them, the sous chef Morel, lean, jaw locked, eyes glassed with defiance. Kramer stood in the back. Archie leaned on the wall, notebook closed. I abhor redundancy, Wolfe began, voice a canyon carved slowly by time. Yet for your benefit, I'll repeat myself. He tapped once on the edge of his armrest. A low thunk. Fritz entered with a tray, not bearing food, but a sheet of folded parchment. The original recipe, Wolfe said, for the cherry tart. A forgery, yes, but a clever one. He took the page from Fritz, opened it carefully. It mimicked Delacroix's hand, enough to fool a casual eye. But Delacroix did not cross his capital T's. Here, here, and here. He tapped 3 times. The room breathed. Whoever composed this intended to suggest Claudine destroyed pages to conceal authorship. A feint. It was not pride Delacroix stole. It was protection. He knew the recipe was dangerous. So did someone else. Wolfe gestured. To Archie. Goodwin. Archie straightened. The antique spice box in the cellar had traces of bitter almond. Crushed. That kind of thing doesn't mix itself. Wolfe nodded once. No. Nor does it walk behind false panels on its own. He folded the page, slid it onto the table. Someone framed Claudine, and they failed. Claudine exhaled for the first time in 10 minutes. Morel's shoulders rose. His heel tapped once on the floor. Langford cleared his throat. Wolfe ignored both. I am intolerant of distraction, and worse, of sloppiness. The events that brought us here began before Delacroix died. They began the moment he decided to share his kitchen. His gaze slid to Morel, the sous chef. Morel, tell me, did Delacroix ever thank you? Morel's jaw ticked. Wolfe's brow did not lift. No, he didn't. He took your garnish, your plating, your reductions, but never your name. I imagine that. Curdled. Kramer shifted. Morel looked ahead. I said nothing, he replied. I kept the kitchen running. Yes, said Wolfe, but not for him, for yourself. He tapped again. The red glove, a symbol, staged in Delacroix's dressing drawer, where only one other man had a key, Langford. But Langford was already busy copying wine labels that night, not sneaking gloves into velvet boxes. Langford flinched. Wolfe did not wait. The bishop, Wolfe turned, had motive, yes, but no method. Drunken, inconsistent, and most importantly, too vocal. A man who intends to kill does not announce curses at every opportunity. The bishop tilted his head, but offered no rebuttal. And Claudine, Wolfe went on, was never in the building when the almonds were crushed. She was attending her brother's recital in Queens. Morel delivered her alibi by mail. Pity he didn't know she saved the ticket stub. Claudine turned, just barely, toward the sous chef. Morel blinked once. That's a lie, he said softly. It's not, Wolfe replied. The lie was yours. Archie crossed the room and placed the ticket stub in Kramer's hand. Wolfe's voice did not rise. It never needed to. You knew Fritz had been sent a sample of the tart, couriered in secret. You were told to prepare it to specifications and report back. But Delacroix, ever paranoid, tested it first. Wolfe leaned forward and died. Morel's eyes narrowed. Wolfe continued. You knew it would kill. You knew bitter almond could be masked, but not indefinitely. So you forged a recipe, you removed the original, you laced the dish, you set the red glove to divert, and you banked on two things, your silence and Delacroix's ego. Kramer took a half step forward. The air thickened. Wolfe said, "But you made one error." He reached for a second page on the side table. This note, addressed to Fritz, from the courier, time-stamped an hour before Delacroix tasted the tart. The package was intercepted. You never sent it. Morel stood. Langford shrank. Fritz, at the door, did not blink. The sous chef spoke. Lips cracked. Voice thinned. "You don't understand what he did. What he took. That recipe. It was mine. Years I spent developing it. While he smiled for the cameras." Wolfe closed his eyes. "Yes, and he died for it." Kramer stepped in. Morel did not resist. Claudine pressed her gloves to her mouth. Langford exhaled. The bishop chuckled once, the sound of defeat. Wolfe turned his chair toward the fire. Archie opened the front door. Fritz returned to the kitchen. Kramer led Morel out with a hand on the shoulder. Wolfe, now in shadow, murmured, "There are few things more dangerous than genius uncredited." Archie closed the door. The clink of polished silver against porcelain had long faded. Outside, snow softened the sidewalks. Inside, the final act unfolded in deliberate silence. Kramer stood near the door, coat unbuttoned, hands tucked behind him. The sous chef, Morel, sat on the edge of a red chair, wrists slack, pride hollowed. A man built for precision, now dismantled. "I could have walked out," Morel muttered. "You didn't," Kramer replied. "You stayed for the applause." Wolfe, unmoved in his yellow throne, tilted his head once. "You stayed," he said, "because you needed someone to recognize the craft, even in destruction." Fritz, arms folded, leaned against the frame of the dining room. He said nothing. His presence was enough. Kramer stepped forward and extended the cuffs. Morel did not resist. Archie watched the click of the steel, the tilt of the detective's hat, the way Morel kept his chin up, as if he still had a name worth defending. "Let's go," Kramer said. They passed through the hall. The door closed, slow and final. Silence returned. Fritz cleared the last place setting and vanished toward the kitchen. Wolfe did not rise. Archie turned toward the stairs, then paused. A knock, not brisk, not urgent. Archie opened the door half a step. Claudine stood beneath a black felt hat, gloves, tucked into one hand. In the other, a box, square, narrow, wrapped in twine. Her coat, grey wool, dusted in snow. "I heard," she said. "May I?" Archie glanced back. Wolfe lifted a hand, one finger. "Yes." Claudine entered. She moved with the air of someone rehearsed, but tired of performing. She stopped at the center of the dining room, placed the box on the edge of the table. "I won't stay. But I brought this as a gesture." She untied the twine, folded back the lid. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was an orchid. Pale ivory with streaks of blood red climbing its veins. Delicate. Alive. Wolfe blinked. "Not once more. Paphia pedalum. Rubrum," Claudine said softly. "Hybridized by my uncle. He bred it after the war, called it solace, said it bloomed in grief." Wolfe said nothing. Claudine straightened. "I know you don't accept gifts, but I thought—" She paused. "Anyway," she turned, coat brushing the carpet, and crossed to the door. Archie held it open. As she stepped out, she said, "You saved more than one life, Mr. Wolfe." And then she was gone. The door shut. Archie waited 3 full seconds. Wolfe exhaled. "No," he said. "No," Archie asked. "Box. Table. Remove it." Archie raised a brow. She offered it sincerely. "I don't care," Wolfe said. "I refuse sentiment, especially when boxed." Archie moved to the table, paused. He looked at the orchid. It wasn't just rare. It was exquisite. Wolfe adjusted the cuff of his sleeve. Archie asked, "Really want me to toss it?" Wolfe said nothing. Archie waited, then turned slowly, took the box in both hands, and headed for the front hall. He passed the vestibule, past the door, reached the foot of the stairs, then heard it. Archie. He turned. Wolfe hadn't moved, but his eyes were open. Yes? Put it in the orchid room. Archie allowed himself a smile. Nothing wide. Right. He turned on his heel. As he crossed the brownstone, the last drift of snow melted against the window. In the kitchen, the air was thick with citrus oil and the slow bloom of saffron. Fritz moved as he always had. Efficient, focused, a maestro, conducting in silence. The copper saucepan hissed over low flame. The cherries, dark and glistening, collapsed into the syrup with a soft hiss. Sugar had dissolved. The saffron threads, plucked by hand and steeped for hours, now released their hue. I leaned against the doorframe, not close enough to interrupt, but far enough to watch. He hadn't spoken in 10 minutes. That, for Fritz, meant the moment mattered. I cleared my throat. He didn't look up. I assume it's safe this time, I asked. Still no glance. He lifted, a copper spoon, turned the mixture once, then twice, then held the spoon up to the light. Thin sheen, ruby gold. Perfectly, he said. He poured the reduction into a cooling dish. Steam curled toward the ceiling like incense in a chapel. This, he said softly, was meant to be shared, not stolen. I didn't ask who he meant. His hands moved over the crust next. Pale, flecked with almond flour, blind baked and still, warm. His fingers knew the measurements without scale or notes. The custard had already cooled beside the sink. He layered each element with the same care I'd seen Wolfe use for his orchid grafts. I stepped closer. Fritz. Yes? You know he'll say nothing. A small smile. He didn't deny it. The tart, assembled, now waited for its final crown. A few flakes of molten salt, a whisper of citrus zest, and then, with tweezers, 3 delicate petals from a saffron crocus placed like scripture at the center. He stood back. It's done. The scent reached even me. Rich, sharp, faintly bitter. I held the door. Let's. The dining room was quiet. Wolfe sat in his chair. No book, no brandy. He simply waited. Fritz entered, carrying the tart on a black lacquered tray. One hand steady beneath its weight, the other folded at his back. He set the tart down. The silverware glinted beneath the overhead lamp. Wolfe regarded it for a full beat. From scratch? He asked. Yes, Fritz said. Wolfe studied him, then carefully picked up his fork. The first bite was deliberate. He chewed. Once, twice, then let it rest. I waited. Fritz waited. Wolfe swallowed. Then, quite softly, he said, acceptable. Fritz bowed slightly. No more. Wolfe continued. Second bite. Then third. I served myself without ceremony. The flavor was astonishing. Sweet, but not cloying. The saffron came through gently, like memory rather than flavor. The cherry tart I'd mocked a dozen times had finally earned its legend. Fritz sat down. Not at the table, but near. His hands folded. No one spoke for 2 minutes. Outside, a car passed. Chains on its tires. Slush against the curb. Wolfe dabbed his mouth. Your restraint with the sugar is noted. Fritz inclined his head. Wolfe said, the crust. Improved. Another nod. Then Wolfe turned to me. Archie, if any portion remains uneaten by morning, you are to destroy it. I raised a brow. Out of principle, he said. I nodded. We ate. Later, in the front room, with brandy poured and snow gathering along the sill, Wolfe sat silent in thought. I sat across. He spoke. Do you believe Claudine knew? I considered. She suspected. Suspicion is not guilt. No, I said, but guilt isn't always noisy. He sipped. The sous chef's resentment was authentic, but the execution, sloppy, I said, and emotional. Yes, Wolfe replied. A bad combination. The fire crackled. He looked toward the dining room. Fritz was not the intended martyr of this tale, but he became the crucible. You think he'll leave? No, Wolfe said. Silence again. He reached for a second pour. The orchid Claudine left earlier sat on a marble stand, half hidden in the window's reflection. Wolfe didn't mention it. I didn't either. The next morning, I found Fritz in the kitchen. The tart dish had been cleaned, the plates stacked. The spice box, the same antique one found in the cellar, now sat open on the counter, empty of almonds. Only the faintest trace remained. He looked up. "Coffee?" he asked. I nodded. He poured, handed it to me. Wolfe didn't say anything. "Else?" "No." He nodded, then looked at the spice box. "I remember when we bought it," he said. "Paris, 1934. Before?" "Yes, before." He closed the box. "I thought the almonds were ceremonial. They usually are." He looked at me. "I could have died." "You didn't." "No," he said. He poured himself a cup. Then, to my surprise, reached into the drawer and pulled out 2 forks. "One last bite," he said. The final slice sat, under a glass dome, preserved, as if awaiting absolution. He placed it on a plate, split it cleanly, served me one half, took the other. I sat. We ate. The silence between bites wasn't awkward. It was necessary. Afterward, he looked down at the plate. "Some men cook for praise," he said. Then he looked up at me. "Others." I nodded. "To silence ghosts."